Welcome inside the hall at Patriot Place as we move indoors because of the elements outdoors here at Gillette Stadium. I'm Mike Petraglia, joined as always by Patriots expert columnist for WEEI.com, Christopher Price. All right, Chris, the Patriots had a little extra time to rest up their bodies for what was 4 games in 18 days, a stretch in which they won 3 of those games and really showed a lot of character, a lot of heart in overcoming the Kansas City debacle and really getting their house in order. And now they have extra time to get ready for what Bill Belichick here at Gillette Stadium told us on Wednesday is one of the very best, if not the best back in the league, all-around back, Matt Forte.
Forte is a guy who can beat you both ways. He can beat you on the ground and in the air. He is a consistent and steady runner, but he's also a guy who leads the league in receptions. So he's a multi-dimensional threat, the likes of which they haven't seen before over the course of the first 7 games of the year. You know, you look back at some of the really good running backs they faced some good backs, but at the same time, they haven't faced a guy like Forte who can beat you both ways.
Well, and I don't know if you knew this about Matt Forte, and I didn't until I did some of the number crunching. He is the first Chicago Bears back to have 75 yards rushing and receiving in a game twice in a season this early since when Walter Payton did it back in 1983. That's the kind of talent we're talking about on Sunday.
He is priority 1 for the New England defense. I think when you look at the rest of that offense, when you look at the rest of that Chicago offense, there's a lot of really talented guys over there. You're talking about Jay Cutler, a good young quarterback, not young quarterback, but a good quarterback. Brandon Marshall, one of the better young receivers in the game. Alshon Jeffrey, one of the better young receivers in the game as well. But I think priority really for New England, it starts with Forte and figuring out a way to slow him down. Both, again, not just when you're talking about slowing down the traditional back, when you're talking about slowing down a between the tackles guy, you can kind of stack the box. You're talking about a guy who can pop outside, who can beat you, and get yards after catch, who can do a lot of different things.
All right, Shalice Manji-Young of the Boston Globe reports that Chandler Jones is out for at least probably a month, we're talking, with a hip injury. They won't have the Patriots. He was not at practice here on Wednesday in the rain. They won't have his services on Sunday. How does that impact the game plan, if at all, defensively?
I think the Patriots need to look at a couple of different guys when you're talking about trying to minimize the loss of Jones. Look, he's their best pass rusher. He's probably their most consistent pass rusher. 4.5 sacks a game, or 4.5 sacks over the course of the first 7 games. Right. Leads the team in quarterback hits. Is tied for the team lead, I believe, in quarterback hurries. He's a guy who has a massive impact on the game. That being said, going forward, there are ways you can kind of minimize that. You can develop a bigger role for Rod Ninkovich. You can look at some of the guys like Zach Moore, Akeem Ayers, who just got here, may have a role on Sunday as well. So there's a few guys, as well as Dominique Easley, the rookie out of Florida, who's played some defensive end, who could see a heightened role in this game if he's feeling okay.
All right, let's spend a little bit of time on Akeem Ayers. This is not really the blockbuster trade as the Patriots swap the late-round draft picks next year with the Titans to bring in a linebacker who was scratched in 5 of the first 7 Tennessee games. Ken Wisenhunt didn't have particularly the nicest things to say, most complimentary things to say about Akeem Ayers. Says, you know, he didn't work hard enough to get back on the field and join our defense. And you're talking about a Titans defense that was in the lower third of all the rankings in the NFL. Where can Akeem Ayers fit in, and do you like the move?
Ayers is an intriguing guy at a couple of different levels. First of all, you mentioned the knees. The knees are a question mark for me. This is a guy who had knee surgery on both knees over the last year plus, and I want to see him here in this system and kind of get a sense of who he is and what he can do. Known more as a pass rusher, he might be the kind of guy who could be called on in situational, situations, if that makes any sense.
Sure.
He may be that kind of guy who could be called on in that role going forward, and then his role is kind of expanded on. But this is really what the trade deadline is. I don't think that there are any sort of Aqib Talib type deals out there this year. You're looking at guys like Akeem Ayers, you're looking at a guy like Alan Branch, you're looking at guys who are available out there to kind of augment what you already have. No one really, at least in my mind, who's going to put you over the top defensively.
Do you think the Patriots should give consideration, or should have given consideration to giving up more to get maybe more bang for their buck and an impact player, given the fact you're going to be without Jerod Mayo the rest of the year, and you really don't even know that when Chandler Jones comes back, he'll be 100%?
Yeah, but the thing is, though, I don't know if there's anyone out there who would be willing to give up. I don't think there's a whole lot of tradable commodities out there, at least at this time of the year. I think in years past, you could point to a guy here or there, especially like if you were the Jets and you needed some offensive help. You saw a guy in Percy Harvin's situation, a guy you wanted to go after. There's no guys like that, at least in my mind, on the defensive side of the ball, at least this time of year. I think Branch might be the closest guy to that because he's a guy who's been kicking around ever since August. He had the DUI and he's been out of the free agent market ever since then. He might be one of those guys, but again, he's another guy I want to see and kind of get a sense of where he is right now at this point in his career to see whether or not he can be a true impact player. But I just don't think that there are any sort of those kind of guys out there right now.
Okay, I spoke to you about this inside before I think it was Bill Belichick took to the podium, and that is Jamie Collins. I think this is a perfect situation for him to really show what he's got, but I think he needs some help, a push from the coaching staff, and not giving him more on his plate, but less on his plate, and really turn him loose. I mean, I know you wrote what you wrote earlier in the season about, I think it was one of the linebackers, you had to really just turn them loose.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm sorry, it was Darrelle Revis. You have to turn Darrelle Revis loose. Well, they turned Darrelle Revis loose, and you saw what happened. Terrific results. I think Jamie Collins is a young, impactful player. You turn him loose as a pass rusher. Is that feasible in the Bill Belichick defensive scheme?
I think it's a really interesting idea because Collins is a guy who could do a lot of different things, but at the same time, he fits really well, at least in my opinion, fits really well right now as that big defender who can run with tight ends and maybe backs out of the backfield. Now, if you move into more of a pass rushing role, you're maybe taking him out of what he does best. It's kind of almost you're robbing Peter to pay Paul. And I can understand the sentiment because in years past, especially as a collegiate, he's shown a really good ability to get after the quarterback. But do you take him out of that role and do you trust, say, a Patrick Chung to be the kind of guy who goes after some of those tight ends as opposed to Collins? It's a tough balance to strike defensively. I think that's something that the Patriots are going to have to consider going forward, especially without Mayo and whether or not Ayers can fit into that mix as well.
And as we've learned, Chris, the Patriots are an always evolving defense and an always evolving team. Let's move to the offensive side of the ball. I know you're working on a piece on Shane Vereen for WEEI.com. Comparing him to the aforementioned Matt Forte, is Shane Vereen somebody you think the Patriots should invest long-term dollars in going forward, a deal like Forte got a couple of years ago?
Yeah, I don't think he's going to get the same kind of deal that Forte got a couple of years ago. I think that was a bit extraordinary, but I think when you're talking about today's NFL, the pass-first NFL, really running backs who can contribute in the passing game, there's a serious premium on those guys, and I think Vereen has shown in the relatively brief time he's been in the NFL, he could be one of those guys. I think Shane Vereen could develop into Matt Forte. Forte's put up phenomenal numbers, and he continues to put up amazing numbers this year. I think Vereen could be that guy over the next 5, 6, 7 years if he stays healthy. He has an amazing skill set. We're talking about a guy who can bring 60 catches, 60 carries to the field. Patriots haven't had that kind of guy since 1994. Leroy Thompson. Kevin Falk never even did that, 60 catches, 60 carries. Leroy Thompson was the last guy in the Patriots in 1994 to hit for at least 60 and 60. Shane Vereen can be that kind of guy, and then he can use that, I think, as a jumping off point to even bigger and better things down the road. Not saying he's going to be Forte this year, but 2, 3, 4 years from now, I think he has a real shot to be that guy.
And clearly, Chris, with Stephen Ridley lost for the rest of the year, he is now rehabbing after surgery. He is going to have to be somebody that is going to have to pick up a heavier course of the offensive load, and he's certainly shown the ability to be able to do that. One more little nugget about Matt Forte. Nobody in the NFL since 2008 has gained more yards from scrimmage offensively than Matt Forte. Not even Adrian Peterson, who of course has been out the last couple of weeks, suspended. But nobody in the NFL in that span of time has gained more yards from scrimmage. Okay, let's move on to what you think is going to happen. Who wins on Sunday?
I think New England is good enough still, even with all the personnel they've lost on the defensive side of the ball. I think New England is good enough to win this thing. I'm not going to say it's a dramatic ball game. Earlier in the week I said 30-20. I'm sticking with this because I think New England has the capability to force Jay Cutler into making some mistakes. And every time Jay Cutler makes a mistake, turns the ball over, throws an interception, whatever you want, the Bears lose this thing. I think the Patriots are going to force two turnovers this week, 2 interceptions to Cutler, and I think New England's going to use those interceptions to go on. They're going to win this game 30-20.
All right, the Patriots, as you wrote about earlier in the week on WEEI.com, begin a really important 6-game stretch that is going to define the 2014 Patriots. I think you were dead on the money about this. It's Jay Cutler and the Bears, followed by Peyton Manning and the Denver Broncos to wrap up the homestand, and then things really start to ratchet up a level here in Foxborough. We'll see how the 5-2 Patriots handle the Chicago Bears here on Sunday afternoon at Gillette Stadium. We'll have complete coverage. Christopher Price, Ryan Hannibal, and yours truly on scene, bringing you all the coverage on WEEI.com. Inside the hall of Patriot Plates, for Christopher Price, I'm Mike Petraglia, WEEI.com.